Today, I want to talk about the biggest barrier to entry in the aquascaping hobby, and that's the plain and simple topic of why is aquascaping so expensive? There you go, right out the gate, plain and simple. Aquascaping is expensive. And in today's video, I want to talk about why it's expensive and then ways that you can make it less expensive. I'll also break down my tanks behind me and give you an exact cost of what it took to set them up. But first, if you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you again for all your support. So every week I sit right here in front of these three tanks, and in my opinion, I think the tanks look pretty nice, but they did cost a lot to set up. And the reason for that is because I'm running top of the line equipment on all of these setups. So let's dive in and take a look at the tanks, and I'll give a breakdown of what they cost. To start off, let's talk about the big tank behind me here, the Forest Aquascape, which is sitting in the UNS Dual 60. Once we're done talking about the Dual 60, then we'll talk about the 45U right here, because they do have significantly different price ranges of what they cost to set up. So we'll go over both the dual tank in the back and the 45U off to the side. Let's get started. So first things first, let's talk about the light on this tank. This tank is running the TwinStar EA version 4 series light. This thing is an absolute beast of a light and checks in at about $137 US currency. Now, I will be upgrading this light to a Chihiros WRGB Pro Slim very soon. I think the Pro Slim is gonna have a better color profile that's more adjustable than the TwinStar, but the TwinStar is still incredibly powerful and can get the job done for any tank, but it weighs in at about $137. Now, before we go any further, I do want to state that this video is not intended to flex on you or say that my stuff is better by any means. The whole purpose of this video is I want to show you what something like this and the tank behind me, what they actually cost. And I want to give you actual numbers so that you can budget appropriately and set up a tank just like this if you want. The video is not intended to flex at all. If it even comes across that way, please let me know. I don't want it to come across that way. I want to make sure that you know that I am just a humble aquascaper still learning this hobby, and I just want to share with you how much these things cost. Also, basically everything you see here in my gallery has been provided to me by my sponsors. So I did not buy these things. They were gifted products by my sponsors. So massive shout out to those folks. It's the folks over at Boost Plant, 2 Hour Aquarius, Beta Botanicals, and Moss Cotton. Without those folks, I definitely would not be able to be doing what I'm doing right now. So these things are all gifted by the folks that are sponsoring me. So massive thank you to those folks. I'll leave the links to their websites and their about information in the video description below, so make sure to check that out when the video's over. Okay, now back to the tank. This dual system comes in multiple sizes and the price range fluctuates based on the size of the tank that you get. This is the Dual 60. I believe the smallest one that they make is the Dual 30, and I believe it runs in at $150 for the Dual 30. The Dual 60 is a little different. I'll get to the price on that in a little bit, but it's a lot more expensive because it's significantly bigger than the Dual 30. All right, so like I said, this is the Dual 60 and it checks in on boostplant.com at $260 US. Now, basically double the Dual 30 because the Dual 30, like I said, is $150. So just add an extra $110 and you've got the price of the Dual 60. The next thing to talk about is the stand that this tank is on, and that's the UNS 60U matte black stand. This thing is an absolute beast. It weighs a ton and it's super sturdy, so I have absolutely no concerns about it holding the weight of this tank. Now the stand itself is a bit expensive. In fact, it's actually more expensive than the dual tank. The stand costs $400 US currency. All the prices that I'm going to mention are in US currency. So just keep that in mind. And if you're overseas or international, just, do the calculations on your own so that you can determine how much it actually costs. I don't know the currency exchange right now. Anyway, the stand itself costs $400. And I don't know that I necessarily agree that it's worth $400, if I'm being completely honest, but it is incredibly sturdy. It's well designed. I love that the back end is open so you can get cords and everything you need through it. And it's got side holes as well so that you can get your filter tubing through, or in my case, it's the CO2 lines. And that way you don't have to worry about going through the back end or anything like that. Is it worth $400? I don't know if it's worth $400, but it is worth a decent amount of money because it's very well built and it's very sturdy. Like I said, I've got carpeted floors and I have no concerns about it collapsing or holding whatsoever. When it comes to filtration, as you know, it's a dual all-in-one system. So the filtration is included in the back of the tank. So there's no canister filter or anything. That's already included in the price of the tank itself. So equipment-wise, with the light, the stand, and the tank, you're looking at about $800-ish or just underneath that. There's also hardscape, substrate, and plants to consider with this tank. And I don't have exact costs of what that breaks down to because that was a while back that I built this tank and I couldn't find the order info from way back when. I would estimate there's probably about $100 to $150 worth of plants, substrate, and hardscape in this build. So that brings our total to like $1,100 now. Another thing that's running on this system, but I don't know that I would count it in the setup of this because I already had it long before I even set up this system, is my CO2 system. If you've already got CO2 systems in your gallery, then you don't even have to worry about that. But if you've never done CO2 before, then you're gonna need to budget probably about $150 to $200 just for the CO2. It's a big investment, but trust me, it's worth it in the end because your tanks will look much better. You have way more flexibility in what you can do in aquascaping with CO2. And once you actually make the investment of purchasing the CO2, it's really not that expensive to keep running. I have a 5-pound cylinder of CO2 that lasts me about 6 months over 3 tanks, and it cost me $25 to refill it. So it's not that big of a deal once you make that initial investment. But keep that in mind when you're setting up a system if you don't already have CO2. Now, when it comes to the 45U, the price is significantly different because it's a much smaller system than the big dual behind me. The 45U is 9 gallons in size and the dual 60 is 22 gallons in size. So basically double. Yeah, I had to think there for a second. Sorry. It's double the size, so it's basically half the price. I'm gonna run through the equipment and the cost of this one as well because this is a high-tech setup. So there's, again, some top-of-the-line equipment being run on this tank. Let's dive right in. Now, disclaimer, the 45U is my favorite tank to scape with. I've got 2, technically 3, but there's a 3rd one in my closet I haven't scaped. It's coming soon, so if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do so right now so that you can see that build. Anyway, I love the 45U. The tank itself checks in around $95, which for what you're getting and the quality of the tank and the size, I think is a pretty reasonable price. Now the light on this system is the Chihiros C2 white LED light, and I absolutely love this light. I think it's one of my favorites in the hobby. It checks in at $95, so basically the same price as the glass, but I think it's really worth it. So including plants and hardscape and soil and all that kind of stuff, I estimate this tank checks out to be around $350 to $400. So again, significantly cheaper than the big tank behind me, but it is still an investment. Like I mentioned though, all these tanks are running top of the line, high-end equipment. So there are ways that you can make systems like this for a lot cheaper of a cost. One of the ways I did that is with the stand. Instead of buying a expensive high-end top-of-the-line stand, I went to my local IKEA and just found a cheap little cabinet stand that I felt could support the weight of an aquarium. I think the stand cost me around $40, so that's where I got that estimate of about $400 for the whole system. And to be honest, I think it holds up just as well as the aquarium stands that you get from aquarium stores would. I think it's still a very great option, and it's a great budget option if you're not willing to spend $400 on a stand or a significant chunk of money on the stand. So that leads to the ultimate question of how to save money when building an aquarium. And the truthful answer is that it's hard to do it sometimes, but it is possible, and it takes dedication and time to do so. First thing is, the easiest answer is, don't buy high-end, top-of-the-line stuff. There's plenty of options in the aquarium hobby with cheaper materials, there's cheaper lights, there's cheaper tanks. I will say that with the difference, you do get what you pay for. So a $95 rimless UNS 45U is gonna look significantly better than a $20 rimmed Petco tank. Now, if you like the rimmed Petco tank, there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally cool. My first tank that I ever set up was a rimmed 10-gallon that I got from PetSmart. And I had a lid with an LED bulb as the light. So answer one is just simply don't buy high-end equipment. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I think it looks great. High-end equipment is noticeably better looking than low-end equipment, but ultimately they all function and do the same thing. So rather than getting a $300 light, get a $95 light. There are lights that are significantly cheaper, but I will mention that I've noticed when it comes to lighting, you do get what you pay for. A $95 light is gonna perform significantly better than a $20 light just because of the quality of the LEDs. Your plants are gonna notice it, your tank is gonna notice it, and you're gonna notice the difference too. So I don't like to skimp when it comes on lights, but there are other ways like getting a rimmed tank as opposed to a rimless tank where you can save some of that cash. Now, when it comes to plants, unfortunately in the US, plants are basically the same price wherever you go. Local fish stores and online retailers are gonna be very similar in prices. There's not a whole lot of markups within the industry on plants, so there's not really a great one-way ticket to saving money with plants. One of the ways that I have found though is to join a local Facebook group with like-minded hobbyists, see if there's one in your area. Usually in those Facebook groups, there's a lot of trading and buying and selling of plants, equipment, things like that. I know I've been able to join some Facebook groups and give away some plant trimmings that I would otherwise have just thrown away, but I was able to bless other people who were getting into the hobby by giving them some of my plant trimmings. So that's a great way you can save on plants and things like that, is joining a local Facebook group or a local hobby group. Check in with your LFS, see if there's something there like a program, and you can save some money that way. So if I were to think of 3 ways that you could save money while building an awesome looking aquascape, it would be these. Point 1, join a local Facebook group or see if there's any other like-minded hobbyists in your area that you can trade or sell cheap things back and forth with. That's a great way to save money and a great way to make friends within the hobby. The second point I would say is to determine if you want to go with a high-end equipment setup like a rimless UNS tank and a fancy light, or if you want to go the more budget route with like a Petco or PetSmart rimmed tank that isn't going to look quite as good but will still do the job. And the third point is to start simple. If you're new to the hobby, you're going to go through a lot of failures. A lot of stuff is not going to work out. This hobby is all about learning and making mistakes and growing from that. I still make a ton of mistakes every day and I do my best to learn from it. So start simple. You know, if you've never built a tank before, maybe go with a more low budget one, because having that low budget tank is going to make a lot more sense with all the failures that are going to happen than to spend a ridiculous amount of money on a high-end setup and have everything fail. Failure is just part of this hobby. There's no such thing as a first-time success, not in my opinion, that is. So pick something easy, start simple, and it will save you a lot of cash in the beginning. Aquascaping is a beautiful hobby that allows us as humans to view an underwater world that we don't know a ton about. And we get to do it and see it right in our living space, which is so cool. If you do want to go all out from the very beginning, then by all means go for it. I am not trying to stop you at all. But I will just say, if you've never done aquascaping before, there are going to be some failures. So just keep that in mind when you're spending a lot of cash on the systems. No matter the price of your aquarium or what it costs or how cool it looks, this hobby is awesome, and every single one of us that are involved in it are artists, and it's so cool to be involved in a community that's so supportive. So let's support each other. Drop it down in the comments if you have any questions. I'd love to help answer them. This hobby is awesome. Regardless of how expensive your setup is or how low budget your setup is, the hobby of aquascaping is awesome. And everyone in it is doing a fantastic job. We're all working together to progress the hobby and show more people in this world about the awesome hobby of aquarium keeping and aquascaping. So don't get discouraged if you can't afford a high-end aquascape, because you can still make an incredible aquascape in a very low budget system. It is possible, you just have to set your mind to it. I hope this video gave you some insight on, the actual costs of aquascaping, what it takes to get into it. It doesn't take much, but you can spend a lot of money really quickly. So just be careful with that and make wise decisions. Don't go taking out a loan on your house for an aquarium. Please don't do that. But it's an awesome hobby. I hope you found this video informational and useful. If you're not subscribed already, please go ahead and do so. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.